What's up, everybody? Welcome to CFP Talks. My name is Jonas, and with me, as always, is that handsome devil, Mr. David Fuchs.
What was that word you used last week or two? Maybe it was like
Incomparable.
incomparable.
My
I knew it was
vocabulary is
something.
not that big, David. I'm a
I
math guy.
knew I knew it was something with an IN, but I couldn't remember what it was, and I was like waiting to hear either that or like something even better than that. But I'll take that too. I'll take that
David,
too.
like I told you, I can't give it to you good all the time, but I'm glad that between the two of us, we have a seventh grade reading level here. Thank God we're in a math field. Ah, so let's talk a little CFP, shall we? I
Let's
know you
do
got
it.
the real CFP boys behind you.
That's right.
Let's talk about the financial planning CFP. So, a thing that comes up a lot, and I know you probably hear this as much as I do, but and I think what's really interesting is everybody that I talk to that has failed the exam once, and even people who are inside of their at the end of their education programs, and they've talked to other people who have taken the CFP, they really emphasize the question bank.
hmm
And I think that everybody runs into this at some point in time is I do some reading, I do end of chapter quizzes or little practice quizzes and or I have some version where quizzes are spread out throughout this entire program. And at some point I'm doing a lot of questions but I'm not really improving. I get to the 58, 60, 64, maybe I even get to 68%. But then I get stuck. No matter what, I'm kind of just maybe a little bit above, maybe a little bit below, but I can't really seem to push my scores into the high 70s or into the 80s. And this is really a common thing that we see with students. And I always like digging into the reason why. And I think this is a far more subtle thing because I think as adults, the way that we are trained to take exams is not the way that we do it in high school or college or elementary school, where there's some actual real studying going on. But in reality, all we're doing is kind of trying to guess our way through or take the shortest possible path to passing. And if I just do a whole lot of questions, that's my shortest path. And I think that ends up being more of a fallacy than a reality.
I I wasn't sure if you were done there.
Now I'm done. I'm done.
You're done. Yeah, no, I think so. I want to one point you got into a little bit in the beginning of what you just said, but you were talking about how when people are doing like different quizzes and different mock exams and different like stanzas of questions, like they'll get into the 50s or 60s or 70s or whatever, they kind of plateau at some point, and I kind of feel like that is or that is what it's going to be. Like if that's it can only there's kind of a ceiling for how high your level can get to if you're only going to do practice questions and use that as your primary tool to study for this exam. Whereas obviously in the other way, the ceiling is kind of unlimited. You can have, you know, an infinite amount of knowledge that you can put together to get you to above a certain level. If you're just doing questions, you're going to be maxed out at some point. Now, with that being said, it is going to help you a little bit. I don't want to sit here and say that that's like the worst thing and that you're not going to learn anything, but just know that if you're saying, can this help me? Is this going to help me? Yes. Is it going to help me pass? No.
I agree with that. I agree with that. I think the Q Bank is it's like the last step in the process. It's like if you're making a cake, you got to mix all the ingredients first before you put it in the oven. And the Q Bank is the oven in this process. And I think if you try to start baking the cake prior to mixing all the ingredients, or I'm not a chef or a pastry chef, I don't really know. Or letting the dough rest, or is what I think pastry chefs do. but you're not going to get the result that you want to because you did it out of order. I
Mhm.
think the one thing that you got to remember is that the Q bank tests your knowledge, but it doesn't build your knowledge. And I think,
Right.
again, like you're misusing the tool. It's not that the Q bank is a bad tool, but I don't use a screwdriver when I need to be using a hammer. Yes,
Yeah.
I could turn around and knock that nail in with the back of the screwdriver, but eventually that tool is either going to break or it's just going to be so inefficient that I get so tired versus using the right tool at the right time. And I think that's where we all get our mistake is that it is moving us forward. So it feels like there's progress. And I get it. Like if I'm busy, there's one thing that I can always do is I can take out my phone and start doing practice questions.
Yeah. Or yeah, exactly.
Or I
Or
can
you
take out
can,
my iPad. I can sit in bed and just do some questions in bed. And it feels good, right?
yeah. And it's mindless too. I mean, it's not
Right.
mindless in terms of like you having to answer the questions, but it is mindless in terms of like you thinking of what you're going to be doing that day. Like instead of being like, oh, let me take out my textbook and read this or try and, learn that or do this case study or blah, blah. It's like, all right, I'm just going to log into Kaplan or Dalton or wherever, Zon or Wiley, and which I don't even know if they're around anymore. Are they?
No,
Yeah. Or whoever, and then just saying like, all right, I'm just gonna click a quiz and just have them throw questions at me. It's a lot
right.
easier to do
That's
that.
right.
It's such a it is just such a it is. I kind of get why people are like, yeah, I'm just gonna like do practice questions and learn, I'll just learn from the explanations.
Correct. And I think that is one of the biggest misconceptions of this process is you do not learn from explanations. You learn from learning. You have
Yeah,
to
I
set up
mean,
your
yeah.
learning.
Yeah, and you can learn a little bit. Like I said earlier, you can learn a little bit, but that's not the right way to do it for this specific exam. Again, all these FINRA exams and life insurance and college tests or whatever, like that, I think you're fine. This one's a little bit different.
I agree. I agree. And if you think about it with anything else that you've properly learned, and obviously we relate it to sports because it's an easy thing, but it's, think about you're essentially saying that I'm going to go, my way of learning to hit a baseball is to go and just start hitting. I'm going to just swing. And then I'm going to get an explanation from a hitting coach. What did I do wrong? Oh, you swing too low. Okay, so now I'm going to swing lower. You still don't have the proper mechanics because what we're correcting is what you did wrong on that problem, not the bigger thing that's going on.
Mhm.
And that's the advantage of actually learning is that if I'm reading an explanation, I learn what I did wrong in that problem. If I actually learn the concept, then I learn what I did wrong in reference to the concept itself. Right? So for example, if you're doing something in a state and you're learning about gifting, you might be learning about gifting and it says, "Okay, what is the taxable gift in this scenario?" And you learn that one specific scenario. Question changes, guess what happens? You still don't know the concept. You know what you did wrong in that problem, and that's a very different thing than knowing the concept. And this is something that I did with you and with pretty much every student when you come in for an assessment is I'll cover up the answers when we're going through a set of questions and I'll say,
Yeah.
just explain it to me. And if you
Yeah.
can't explain that, and this is your true knowledge of a concept, if you can boil down a very complex thing, very complex concept, into a couple of sentences or less, then you probably understand it. If you're stumbling and bumbling and fumbling and you have to go through paragraph after paragraph to explain it, and a great example of this is I was actually teaching a Series 7 class and I was asking about the three parts of a margin account that need to be signed by the client. And I go, what's the loan consent agreement? And the one person just goes, it's not necessary, it's optional. Correct. You saw it in a practice question. You saw which one of
Right,
these is
right.
optional.
But that's not like what it
But
is.
what is the loan consent agreement? And okay, that is where the client lends the securities to the broker dealer. The broker dealer can in turn lend it to other clients. And it is an optional agreement because they're going to lend it to short sellers. You don't have to do that. Okay. If you can't explain that, and again, in a couple of sentences or less, and ideally what we do even with some concepts is we boil it down to 3 or 4 words because you can't walk into a question knowing that one iteration. So if you're ever sitting there to yourself going, I don't even know what the question is asking, you've done too many QBank questions without learning. If you're sitting there going, oh man, the wording is so difficult, you've done too many QBank questions without learning. Let me make this abundantly clear. The QBank is a necessary part of your learning. How you do the QBank will ultimately determine your success or failure on the exam. Period. I don't want anybody to walk away from this thing. I'm saying the QBank is bad. It's not bad, but with anything that there's convenience, it's a double-edged sword. Right? Seamless is great, but I can order a pizza in bed. That's probably not the best thing for me. Very convenient, very bad for Joe's waistline.
And I also think that it provides, to a point, a false sense of confidence because a lot of times, you're either getting stuff right because you either guessed or you may have seen that exact same question before. Because a lot of times they're recycling these questions and you just get into this rhythm of, oh, you've seen this one before, you know exactly what the answer is. So I personally think that the scores that you get on your in the Q bank, whether it's like a 10 question quiz or a 20 question quiz or a half mock exam or whatever it is, I usually say those are typically overinflated.
I agree with
And
that.
and if you're saying, you need to get like a 70 or 72 and you're getting like you're probably going to want to get in like the 80s plus just to provide that buffer because again I think that I don't know exactly what the number is. I can't put a mathematical figure on it, but I believe that it is overinflated the number that you get on those with anything that you do in the cubic. So it provides a false sense of overconfidence
That is really
and
well said.
comfort. Yeah, and comfortability because you just get comfortable, and that's not how you're going to be doing it on the actual exam.
Well, yeah, I mean, like you're basically tricking yourself to thinking you're at a better place than where you are. And that feeling in your chest and the feeling in your gut that like I don't really know this. Trust
Mhm.
that feeling because
Yeah.
and you know it, right? Because you look at it and you go, it's a good score, but I don't know if I can do
But
that.
I know I kind of like, not cheated. You didn't cheat, but like it's you're almost like cutting corners. And anyone that goes like, yeah, I did really well. Like I crushed the Q bank and I got all these questions right. You got to think that they're a little bit overinflated, and you got to think that there's a false sense in there. And like you said, I remember when I was going through them and answering questions, and I would do a 20 question quiz and I'd get 18 out of 20 right. And I'd be like, oh, nice, I got a 90. And I'd always think to myself, but like, did I really get a 90? Like, am I really at a 90% mastery level? I'm
Yes.
like, probably not.
Right. And it's a really good point, David, because what you're saying is important because you're also going to start recognizing the pattern of your QBank.
Yeah.
Right? So there's some questions that you're going to see before. So think about that. Even in a 20 question quiz, if you've seen 3 questions or 4 questions in the past, and now you're getting those 3 or 4 right, and you got 18 out of 20, you really might be at a 14 out of 20,
That's what I'm saying. Like, so
right?
there's like a standard error.
Yeah, and
Like,
and
there's like a
that
margin of error that you need to take into account.
and that is more realistic because again, and especially again, you start doing these things over and over again, you're going to start to pick up on the pattern. when you look at certain test providers, and I know it from looking at different Q banks, there's a very specific way they write their answers. So you know that, oh, that's the bad answer. That's definitely okay. Now I can bring it down to two. I can almost guess my way there. What does that do for you? What have you learned? Right. And especially with something like retirement, where you can kind of guess your way. Oh, that's too little. That's too much. There's two in the middle. I'm going to go with this one because of this. Still a guess.
Hmm.
So, don't let yourself kind of fall into the trap of, I'm doing well on my Q bank, therefore I am ready to take the exam. Make it more so, I am doing well because I knew the answer even without looking at the answer. Therefore, I am ready for another question of this type.
Yeah, and you say it all the time too about it, and you said it, earlier. You were like, it's not it doesn't it tests your knowledge, it doesn't build it. And just to that point, use the Q bank and all the practice questions as a way to affirm what you know, not teach you the topic.
Correct. And I'll even add one more word and we'll end on that. The Q bank should refine, not teach. So I like that word affirm. It should build confidence in what you know. It should help it should further your understanding. But think about your learning and what you do outside of the Q bank should take you 70% of the way, whereas the Q bank should take you the other 30% of the way.
Mhm.
But remember that 70%, it's going to take you a lot more questions to fill that 70% than if you just learn the material. And I know, and the easier way to do it is with the Q bank, but the far more efficient way to do it is to learn the material. I
Mhm.
get it. It stinks. Nobody wants to be in the book. Nobody wants to do open answer. You don't really want to even think that much. That's hard at the end of the day. I get it. But if your true goal is to get from where you are to the CFP in the shortest amount of time, you're going to have to learn the material. There's no outrunning knowing the material. So, with that being said, everybody, we hope that you enjoyed this episode. With any questions, comments, or concerns, please reach out to David or myself. Please make sure to subscribe to our channel and to like this video so we can continue bringing you more great CFP Talks content. Have a great day.